Have you ever wondered why some men navigate through decades maintaining steel-like confidence, mental clarity, and the sanctity of their resources, while others, often smarter and more successful, suddenly find themselves at a broken trough? On the Psychology Couple Circle channel, we do not engage in empty consolation or sell illusions. We expose the psychological mechanisms that people usually avoid discussing on dates, and today, your perspective on trust will change irrevocably. Most men lose in this life not because they aren't good enough or because they showed weakness. They lose because they issued an unlimited credit of trust too early without bothering to check the foundation upon which they decided to build the castle of their destiny. The problem is that at the beginning of any journey, everything always looks perfect. She says exactly what you want to hear. She projects support. She creates the illusion of that special woman you've been searching for your whole life. And it is at this moment of maximum comfort that a man makes his most fatal mistake. He stops observing. When we are warm and cozy, our brain switches off critical thinking and we close our eyes to minor inconsistencies that will later turn into bottomless abysses. You won't notice the game starting until the damage is irreparable. This video is your strategic insurance against blind trust, which destroys lives, reputations, and entire fortunes. The first and perhaps most difficult aspect for a man to accept is the realization that human intentions and feelings can change at any moment without any visible reason. We are raised on idealized scenarios where loyalty is a constant and love is a granite slab. We want to believe that the phrase, "I am yours forever," has a lifetime guarantee. But in reality, many people move through life like climate zones. Yesterday she was tender, posted joint photos, and called you her only North Star. But today she is cold, distant, and irritated by the very fact of your presence. Men make the mistake of perceiving this change as a mystery that needs to be solved immediately. You start replaying the latest conversations, looking for your failings, apologizing for things you never did. You embark on an exhausting chase after her fleeting mood, trying to bring back that spring that was there at the beginning. But it's important to understand here, respect rarely disappears. In an instant, it is washed away by invisible drops of neglect. If you have made a woman's mood the center of your universe and the main source of your motivation, then at her slightest cooling, you will lose not just a partner, but the connection with yourself. A true leader never makes his trajectory dependent on someone else's emotional chaos. When you have your own direction, work, and goals, the unpredictability of another person does not cause you to panic. You do not ask for stability from someone who does not know where the wind of their own shifting emotions is blowing. The second mechanism that systematically destroys the male psyche is the collision with a person who has not decided on their own desires. This state of danger lies in the fact that it makes you feel insufficient, no matter how much effort you put in. When you hear about your perfection in the early stages, do not let this phrase lull your vigilance. In psychology, this is often called mirroring. In reality, she is not describing your personality, but that temporary state of euphoria she experiences thanks to your attention. As soon as the chemistry fades, her truth changes to the diametric opposite. Men fall into the trap of trying to maintain this ideal status. You start playing a role, afraid to show fatigue or human weakness, afraid to say no, fearing that this house of cards will collapse without your constant investment. But a man is not born to be an entertainer in the theater of someone else's expectations. Your task is to set the vector. If you do not lead your own life, someone else's impulsive emotions will do it for you. A woman who truly respects you values not your efforts to please, but your internal foundation and the ability to remain yourself under any pressure. A smooth transition to the next aspect reveals one of the most insidious habits, selective honesty. It doesn't look like an outright lie. It is presented as maximum openness, but in reality, it is a strictly controlled truth. Never expect a person who has decided to betray your trust to come and admit it directly. Such truth carries too heavy consequences for the speaker's comfort. So you are given exactly as much information as needed to keep you in the dark while making you feel trusted. Phrases about just colleagues, your excessive suspicion, or how your jealousy is killing the feelings are classic tools for shifting focus. The problem magically shifts from her suspicious behavior to your inadequacy. And now you are no longer asking questions, but defending yourself, apologizing for your intuition. Men often fall in love with beautiful explanations, forgetting to look at the naked facts. Words can be rehearsed, tears can be summoned on cue, but behavioral patterns cannot be faked. If the story changes in details a week later, if simple questions are met with aggression, that is your truth. Trust your eyes more than your ears because ears are the entry gates for manipulations, while eyes are the instrument for objective reality analysis. Delving deeper, we inevitably arrive at the nature of betrayal. When boundaries are violated, the excuse, "it was a mistake, I didn't want to," is often heard. At Sicaria, we view this as a purposeful and conscious choice. Betrayal is not a sudden fall into a pit. It is a long ladder that a person descended voluntarily, step by step. It started with a message that didn't need to be answered, with a flirtation that shouldn't have been encouraged, with a meeting that should have been declined, with a lie that had to be constructed to cover these steps. To call it a mistake is an attempt to make the act seem accidental, devoid of deep meaning, and easily forgivable. Many men make a fatal step. They accept this excuse and then start bargaining with their self-respect. They look for reasons within themselves, turning into free advocates for those who betrayed them. But the reality is, a person can be stressed, depressed, or lonely, yet still remain faithful to their choice and respectful of their partner. Betrayal is not a consequence of circumstances. It is a reflection of internal ethics and values. By forgiving such an act as a mistake, you give a silent signal that you can be treated however they like, and you will find an excuse for the aggressor yourself. Next follows an equally important topic: financial fog and imposed debt. There is a trap hidden behind the phrase, "your money doesn't matter to me. I'm not with you for the resources." Often, this is just a tool for temporarily lulling a man's vigilance. The game isn't always played openly. Often, it sounds like a hidden demand. Prove your worth forever. It starts imperceptibly. First, she emphasizes her selflessness. But then, she starts comparing you to others, showing coldness when you set budget boundaries or demanding comfort, calling it a basic need of any normal woman. You fall into a scenario where your right to respect must be constantly bought. Love in this format turns into a monthly subscription fee. As long as you pay with resources, attention, and time, the service functions. As soon as you prioritize your goals and tasks, a technical failure occurs. Blind trust here is dangerous because you stop noticing how you turn from a full partner into a sponsor of someone else's peace, who is also obliged to apologize for the fact that his resources are not limitless. Now we have come to the phenomenon I call emotional default. This is the state a man falls into when he has invested in a woman for years, hoping for reciprocal loyalty in the future, but eventually discovers that all his assets have been devalued. Many men believe in the concept of an emotional bank account. If I do many good things for her, she will never leave me in a difficult moment. However, in relationship psychology, this law often works the other way around. When you give too much in advance, you lower the market value of your contribution. A woman begins to perceive your over-efforts as a basic, self-evident norm. As a result, when you yourself need support or when you make a minor oversight, you are met not with gratitude for the past years, but with a grievance. You discover that all your past merits have been zeroed out in a single second. This is the default, a situation where your deposits in the relationship do not guarantee you any insurance. To avoid this, your trust and your resources should be given out in doses as a reward for real-time tested actions, rather than as an advance for beautiful promises. An important additional point that almost no one mentions is social devaluation through the immediate environment. Often manipulation is built not only within the couple, but through the slow poisoning of your connections with friends and family. It can act extremely subtly, expressing concern that your friends are a bad influence on you, or hinting that your relatives do not value you enough. The goal of this tactic is to create a vacuum around the man so that she becomes his only source of information, support, and confirmation of significance. When you are isolated, your critical thinking blunts and you start trusting her version of reality even when it is absurd. This is a form of psychological siege where trust is used as a tool to destroy your rear. If you notice that your old connections are starting to collapse under her caring guidance, know that you are in the epicenter of a takeover of your consciousness. Another critical aspect we are obliged to examine is the phenomenon of reality replacement through emotional roller coasters. A man's trust is often bought not with stability, but with artificially created chaos, followed by a stormy reconciliation. This cycle forms a biochemical dependency in you, similar to gambling. In moments of cold, you are ready for any concessions and unreasonable trust just to bring back that heat she gives after a conflict. This is an insidious strategy where trust becomes not a result of safety, but relief after stress. When your nervous system is exhausted by the constant expectation of a blow, you begin to believe any kind of word as the ultimate truth. But remember, in healthy relationships, trust is a quiet harbor, not a short respite between storms. If your peace is constantly sacrificed for the sake of bright feelings, you are in a system where trust is used as anesthesia before the next operation to extract your resources. This state of affairs leads to a total loss of male self-awareness, where you begin to doubt your own eyes and memory. You remember seeing a lie, but under the pressure of her righteous anger, you begin to believe you imagined it. This is the highest form of betrayal of trust, making a person not trust themselves. When a man stops trusting his perception, he becomes absolutely controllable, turning into a shadow of the leader he used to be. You start looking for confirmation of your rightness from her, which is the height of absurdity. At this moment, the castle of your personality finally falls, and you become merely a function in someone else's game. This is exactly why, on the Psychology Couple Circle channel, we pay so much attention to returning to facts, to the rigid logic of actions that does not depend on the emotional background. Actions are the only solid bricks from which trust can be built. Everything else is shifting sand. To avoid being in the role of a perpetual defendant and a sponsor of someone else's whims, you must possess the skill of holding the frame of your own reality. In moments when you feel pressured through guilt, ambiguity, or coldness, you must use a tool that instantly regains control. This is the indicator phrase. When the situation heats up and justifications are expected from you, you should look her calmly in the eyes and say in a deep, confident voice, "Teal Swan, I've noticed that you're currently using a behavioral manner that usually makes men fuss, feel guilty, and apologize. I'm really interested to see who you are for real when you don't need to play these social chess games to get what you want or hide the truth." This phrase has a devastating effect for several reasons. First, you clearly demonstrate that you see through the structure of manipulation, which automatically strips it of its power. You do not show aggression. You show the cold curiosity of an adult researcher observing a child's game. You communicate, "I see you. I understand your code, and I am not here to play by your rules." This is the behavior of a man who is the sole master of his life and his attention. You are essentially telling her that her emotional acrobatics are transparent and have no currency in your world. By refusing to enter the emotional storm she created, you remain the anchor of the interaction. Second, you shift the burden of proof onto her. Now, she needs to prove that she is not a manipulator, but a deep and honest personality. Instead of you working to regain her favor, she must now work to regain your respect. Third, you establish a standard of communication based on objectivity, not emotions. This subtle pivot forces her to engage with your logic or risk appearing irrational and immature. A smooth transition to the conclusion brings us to the main idea. Blind trust is a luxury that a man with long-term goals cannot afford. My message is not that you should become cold cynics, lock yourselves in a bunker, and start hating the whole world. My message is that your trust is the most expensive currency in your life, and it cannot be handed out to random passers-by in the hope of reciprocity. It must be earned through years of consistent, logical, and verifiable behavioral patterns. Every step taken by you towards a person must be supported by a countermove proportional to your investments. You are the architect of your own peace, and every brick you lay must be tested for structural integrity. True wisdom lies in keeping the door open but guarded. You must understand that controlling access to your resources is not paranoia, but hygiene of the consciousness. Never let your emotions sign checks that your reality cannot cash. Blindly handing over the keys to your mental kingdom is an invitation to its eventual plunder. Ask yourself, how often over the past year have you ignored your intuition for the sake of maintaining peace in a relationship? Every such instance is a crack in your foundation. We often justify our naivety as kindness, but in reality, it is simply a fear of facing the bitter truth. If you feel the need to ignore the red flags, you are already surrendering your territory to an occupant. Remember that temporary peace bought at the price of your self-respect is merely a delay before the inevitable catastrophe. To be truly strong means having the courage to look reality in the eye, no matter how unsightly it may be. Your life is not a testing ground for someone else's experiments. It is a project for which you bear personal responsibility to yourself. And if someone tries to use your trust as a weakness, that person does not deserve a place in your future. Your time and energy are irreplaceable resources, and spending them on those who play selective honesty is a crime against your own potential. Any communication that systematically undermines your self-confidence should be immediately reviewed. Allowing disrespect to fester under the guise of working things out only accelerates the rot of your authority. You are the sole guardian of your internal sanctuary, and no one else will defend its borders if you decide to leave them open. Men lose their peace and greatness not in one dramatic moment. They lose them slowly. A little disrespect becomes the norm. A little lie becomes a trifle. A little self-justification becomes the truth. With every such compromise, you give away a piece of your territory. Gradually, the boundaries of your personality narrow until only a ghostly trace remains. When you accept the unacceptable once, you set a precedent that will be used against you 1,000 times over. And before you know it, you find yourself in a relationship where you are the only one fighting for the value and survival of this union. You become a hostage to your own investments, afraid to admit that the foundation has long since rotted. By agreeing to less, you automatically deprive yourself of the opportunity to get the best. But realizing the problem is already half the way to its solution. You can always draw the line and say, from this moment, the rules change. Reclaiming your borders requires the ruthlessness to prioritize your mission over her comfort. It is better to stand alone in a fortress you control than to live as a guest in a home that has become your prison. Every second you spend negotiating with someone who does not value your sovereignty is a second stolen from your true legacy. The goal of this video on the Psychology Couple Circle channel is to wake up that internal guardian within you who has been lulled by social dogmas and false ideals. Stop being naive with your most valuable resource. Your energy is the fuel for your achievements, not for maintaining someone else's comfort. True partnership is only possible where both participants understand the price of a word and bear responsibility for their actions. If there is no foundation of consistent actions behind a woman's words, if her words change with the direction of the wind, such words are not even worth the air spent on their pronunciation. Respect yourself enough not to accept cheap fakes for real feelings. You are the captain of your ship, and only you decide who is allowed to stand on the deck and who must stay on the shore. Trust is not something you give at the beginning of a relationship as a free bonus. Trust is a cup awarded to the winner at the end of a long and honest marathon. When you start treating your trust as a supreme reward, the quality of people around you will change magically. Those who are used to easy manipulations will disappear, unable to withstand your depth and insight, and the few who are capable of true devotion will see in you a leader worth following. You create your world by your standards, and those who enter it are obliged to observe them. Remember that your peace is the only base upon which something truly great can be built. Write in the comments one phrase about your experience with these patterns. Be honest with yourself and with us, because awareness is the first and most difficult step toward true freedom. We are creating a community here of men who choose the bitter truth over sweet illusions. Remember that your life belongs only to you, and no one has the right to manage your peace without your consent. Subscribe to Psychology Couple Circle so as not to miss the next deep breakdown of signs that most men ignore at the very beginning of the journey, condemning themselves to future pain. Your peace, your resource, and your path are the most important things you have in this world. Live with your eyes open. Do not let the fog of words hide the reality of actions from you. See you in the next